All right, welcome back. This is the end of the world. Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I am Stu. And today we are talking about Alex Garland's 2024 masterpiece, some are calling it, Civil War. Some are saying that it is, in fact, the greatest film since Citizen Kane. Others are, in fact, saying it's a terrible piece of trash. And which side of this fence do we fall on? You'll have to listen to find out. But before that, Michael, don't you have something you want to tell the listeners?
Yeah, I feel like we've been doing a really bad job of this. So off the top today, I just want to remind you, if you are listening to the podcast, thanks. But you can really help out by throwing us a rating on anything like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. And obviously also if you can go ahead and follow us on Instagram at the end of the world WMS. The whole thing. Any shares, anything like that helps.
Yeah, and if you do like the show,
tragically or otherwise,
yeah.
So please.
If you do like the show,
do.
the best thing you can really do is to tell a friend.
Yeah, tell a friend,
and then share the show with a loved one. Then you'll have something.
They say someone that likes a podcast will tell one person. They say a person that hates a podcast will tell 10 others. So
really? So if you really hate it.
We'll find out. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. You can feel free to also tell.
That's right.
We welcome hate listens. We welcome.
Listens of all kinds.
Any kind of engagement is golden in our eyes. So Civil War. This is a first for the pod. Michael and I actually went to the movies together. It was a date.
Yeah, and I guess we should say it's definitely soon enough after the theatrical release of this to have a spoiler alert.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it and you want to see it and you don't want to... If you haven't
seen it and you really want to see Civil War...
Don't see it, but...
No, I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah, but... it's a species of atrocity that must be seen in order to be believed. Yeah, so there'll be full spoilers for the movie. So if you don't want that, you can check out now. Thanks for dropping by. Go see it.
Come back after you've watched it.
Come back for our hammering insights into this film. So I remember seeing a preview or a trailer for this at another movie, maybe around Christmas time or something like that, and was like, oh wow, oh my god, like. He's going there. Like, how can anyone be so like this is going to be the most edgy movie of all time? Oh, and just given that we're in 2024, this is late April that we're recording this at 2024, and things are bad. Like the politics is bad. We're in the middle of the war in the Middle East. We are in the middle of Donald Trump being on trial, and it seems every day of that there's more madness. And both sides of the political process seem horrible. And
they don't even seem functional. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's so many things.
Well, the one thing we can do is give as much money as possible to like other countries' militaries. That seems like
that's the one
there's
thing.
Like bipartisan
the levers
support.
Of power. Yeah.
I mean, the Republicans were kind of stalling on that for a while, but just the other day they're like, no, you know what? Let's just give $80 billion to Ukraine or whatever. It's like
but it doesn't. Okay. I mean, I was talking about this with a friend the other day. It doesn't feel like an election is taking place. And I mean, I'm sure part of that is
fatigue,
because we are, well, it's not just fatigue. It's like there is serious goddamn shit going on in Israel, truly heinous stuff. And so like, I think that it wouldn't have really felt like an election as we've been used to at any time, but for some reason it just, I compare it to 2020.
Well, I think part of that is that both sides essentially are in agreement on how to handle the Middle East.
Yes,
I mean,
it also just doesn't feel like the election is political, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel like anybody is talking about anything to do with.
No, it feels
even in the banal way that candidates talk about what they're going to do as president doesn't really seem to be part of the equation anymore. Like one guy's in court. The other guy can't really campaign. right?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it's
he
fucking
gives.
April. I mean, the election's soon, you know?
Yeah, the
It's
election's
like
in like just a little bit more than 6 months,
the
and
conventions are in what? The
end
conventions are
of
in four
August, early
months?
September, or
Yeah,
something like that.
right.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I think also though I stand by my claim of fatigue. It's like these two people already ran against each other 4 years ago. Donald Trump is like the most overexposed person in human history,
Yeah,
and
I
Joe
guess I
Biden
get,
is Joe Biden. There's like not that much to say about him. He's
yeah,
very
I guess what I
old.
mean,
He's not particularly vibrant except when like something happens and he gives the State of the Union and
yeah, he's on
feel
like most perfectly crafted drug cocktail,
yeah,
of all time.
it's like
Sure.
there's not a lot for them to say, and there aren't very
But there's
many.
also not a lot.
There's no
There's also not a
substantive.
lot of like
There's no. There's no
policy. Yeah,
differences.
there's
Like
no
Donald Trump
differences.
wants to cut more taxes for rich people, and he wants to just murder every immigrant that's coming in the border.
Sure.
And Joe Biden only wants to cut like half as many taxes for the very rich or whatever, and
And
only
wants to
wants
murder
to. Well, he
Palestinians.
just wants to well, they both want to do that. He also wants to
Yeah, that's
indefinitely.
true.
Only wants to indefinitely detain in like a Mexican concentration camp, not like
Yeah,
nuclear like winter the border.
sure,
So
sure.
so but both options completely horrible. So this movie comes, and I think in a weird way, this movie is like perfect for this moment.
I think so too. I think so
Unwittingly,
too.
not
Well, yes, I don't think it's witting, but I will say that it is interesting that despite the like emptiness of the election campaign,
yeah
right,
that we
it
get a
does
movie
seem
that's this. Go on, sorry.
this completely empty of politics. And on top of that, like there is this sense, and I mean, I don't know where I fall on this, but there is this sense to use like the stupid like on both sides, which is also the totally absurd distinction that we're making. But like,
Yeah,
there's this general feeling that stuff around the election's gonna get really bad, right? And so like whether that's uh, a more concrete version of January 6th, a real
heaven
contesting of what's
forbid.
yeah, but like, do you know what I mean? Like, there are people that think like I've heard people say like, yeah, the 2024 election is going to be nuts. There's not even going to be a 2028 election. Like this thing of like we are now at the cusp of social disintegration, and like into that sense walks this movie, right?
Yeah, and I
like,
mean, I have to say, I feel like that's not true. I think there's a very strong possibility this election is like one of the lowest turnout elections ever.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
people like really don't care. And I think Biden might win just because people are so sick of Trump and Trump is just feels like kind of a spent force. Mark my words, I could be wrong,
hmm,
but it doesn't feel like there's that much righteous anger, and the anti-Biden sentiment, real and necessary as it is nowhere near the levels of hatred that Hillary inspires by just like appearing on a television screen.
yeah.
Anyway,
Although I feel like a lot of people have come to hate Biden on the heels of this Israel shit. I feel like
yeah, but
there are people that
the people that care about that, Michael, are the people that we're friends with and that we know and that we're in the social circles of. The vast majority of lib America actually doesn't care at
yeah, I
all.
guess that is just sadly true.
No, I
Yeah.
mean it's like radical leftists care, college students care, people who are committed to justice in more than a superficial kind of
Hmm.
like I read three novels by women this month kind of way.
Sure.
Y-
Yeah.
those people care about things like what's happening in Palestine. But so we get this movie, and it is, as you've said already, incredibly empty. It is as if someone set out to make a Civil War movie where there was absolutely zero ideology, right? So just to
Right.
set the movie up a little bit, we've got a three-term president. Ooh, could this be a
Yeah.
veiled critique at a potential Trump third term?
Oh,
Um,
but it also tells us that things are a little bit different here.
Whoa, whoa. This version of America is a little bit effed up. Um, and it's Nick Offerman, and we see
Hmm.
very little of him in the film. I think in the opening we see him reciting one of his speeches about this civil war that's going on and how they're on the verge of defeating these evil Western forces or whatever.
Hmm.
And a couple times throughout the film, his voice kind of comes over the radio, giving these sort of canned, overly optimistic, kind of like Goebbels from the bunker sort of energy. Because as we learn in the film pretty early on, it's not going well for the president, right? These other states that have rebelled against the Union are on the verge of taking him out. And are we? Is it explained like why he kept third?
No,
Is
no,
there any
none of it
is
is
there any
explained. But you
policy position he holds about anything that comes up in the movie at all?
no, but you have to then sort of think like, is that surely then that's what he wanted to do, right? I think that
That
he
he's
is
like an
trying.
ultra centrist? Oh, you mean Garland?
Well, no, just like too clever by half. I think is with
Well, I
this
like the
movie.
idea that the president's ideology is like no ideology, and that's why everyone hates him, and
Right.
that's why like people from across the spectrum have united. No, we must have an ideology. No, I will be
Yeah.
president for
Yeah.
another term, and there will be no ideology. There will be ideology, like there because there's literally no like when you all right, Michael, when you think of the Civil War, the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, like what's the first thing you think about?
I mean, I'm just starting to do my Nikki Haley impression of. So there were just a lot of factors, and some good, some bad. The country,
Yeah,
um,
no,
no,
brilliant.
one would think of slavery and
Immediately,
emancipation
right?
immediately. Yes,
Slavery. Like, why are these states fighting each other? Oh, well, one side wants to keep people of a certain skin tone as human property that
sure.
they don't have to pay and to work on their farms. And it's like the
Yeah.
other side is like, maybe we should stop that, right?
Mhm.
Like very clear ideological, like ridiculously clear. And in
Yeah.
this movie, we're asked to believe that there's a civil war happening in the contemporary United States, which seems unlikely that it would play out like this to me for several reasons. But um, we have no idea why this is happening. And the film follows, ironically enough, follows a group of journalists who, in the waning days of this civil war, are attempting to photograph and interview the president in Washington before he is overthrown.
Yes, this is the whole catalyst for the
This is
movie,
the entire plot of the movie. Is
and it
full.
makes no sense. So the idea is it just has come to them before the movie starts. So nothing has compelled them that we see to do this. It's that they're sitting, with another grizzled, they're all grizzled, vets of the
Well,
journos.
three of them are, and then one is
Right.
a noob. But yeah, go.
Right. But the three where we learned that the plan is DC, right? Is the like hard drinking, he probably like wishes he worked for the Intercept, but now he's at the Reuters, right? And he's like
Yeah, yeah.
he can't stop smoking because he's seen too much, and but he's
This is
still.
Joel, right?
This is Joel,
Who's
and
played by
he
Wagner Mora
yeah,
or
and
Wagner Mora. I don't know.
he
Probably
wants to
Wagner.
go interview the president, but it's not that he's got an interview or an in or there's a way or
Right, nothing's been set
there
up.
it's also like not quite a necessity. Like they don't talk about it at the beginning as Washington will fall, we are going to try to get there
Well, it's
before.
clear that it's under siege, though. They
Well,
talk
right,
about
but
there's the battle lines are at Charlottesville, which is like not so far away from Washington.
right, but the idea that they would be compelled to do this is not really explained
Well, it's
to
especially
anybody.
funny because as we learn very early on in the film, it's utterly unclear what the point of an interview with this guy even would be
That's
because
what I mean.
he doesn't
That's what I mean.
believe in
Yeah.
anything, and we never learn of anything he does believe in if he does. Like
Well, but this sort of sums up the whole movie right at the
Oh,
beginning,
I
which
agree.
is that like they have this imperative to interview the president for no possible reason that other than to like cover it. So what we're meant to like sort of
This
take
is the
in
big
here,
scoop they're going after, and for some reason
yes,
they're
is
the
that like
only journalists brave
it's
enough to
just
do
them.
this.
It's just them. Like they're ready to go. No one else. It doesn't seem that
I mean,
has
I guess we
entertained the idea.
later in the film we see those journalists who are embedded with the Western forces, but they're easily duped by the they
Yeah, but like these journalists are what we are watching is basically like journalism for journalism's sake at the time of a civil war, right?
yeah.
Like they seem to like make the
Well, just the idea of journalism itself is held up as the ultimate good. Like we
well,
are gonna,
and like unchanged during the Civil War,
and
right?
they're like
All these
they're in their
conventions, they're
press
still
jackets
yeah,
that
yeah,
are
yeah,
gonna protect them from people killing them. We're to believe.
right.
So early on, we have Kirsten Dunst is Lee, who has, uh, she's lived a hard
Oh
life
yeah.
of
Oh,
covering.
she's lived. Yeah.
She's lived a hard life of covering battle in many countries.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what year this movie is supposed to be taking place in, but there's a couple lines in it that indicate this is slightly in the future from now, because
Yeah.
she broke through by covering the Antifa massacre. As we know, you had
That's
your big
right.
break when you photographed the Antifa massacre, and I'm like, well, the Antifa massacre. When was that? Like,
Well, Antifa massacre is the only tip that we have of what spilled into a civil war. Basically, is
yeah.
that
Although,
it's sort of
but no, but it's
portrayed
implied.
like
It's also implied that the Antifa massacre was a long time ago because that was her big
yes,
break.
but I think the idea is that then the wheels started
Like that was
coming
like
off.
the waterfall began with that first drop,
That's
so
right.
to
I think
speak.
I think
I
so.
love that I've used that phrase multiple times on the podcast now. Um, so the other character, the grizzled vet, is Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, who's a Garland favorite. He's also in Devs. He's been in. I feel like he's been in a lot of things lately. He's having a real late career resurgence.
From what I can tell, there's no point in having this character in the movie.
Well, I wouldn't say no point. I mean, yeah, he does pointlessly die. Oh, but I guess that's no point.
Sure.
Well, I think he's supposed to be the even older moral conscience who remembers the 60s, kind of.
Yeah, great.
Although that doesn't
Okay.
make sense either if this is like 20 years from now. Yeah, anyway, so
His character basically is that he cares so much about writing political pieces for like Reuters
yeah,
that he's willing
wherever.
he places his work that he's willing to put himself in situations that he plainly can't deal with given his age and physical
He's
condition.
70 and not
it's just
particularly
that, like,
healthy in his 70s.
What does he say? He's like, but if we didn't, if we just didn't, we'd get bored. That's our curse,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
cool, man. Yeah, you need to be bored.
God bless him. What a wonderful man.
So then the quartet is put together by
Kaylee
the last person,
Spaney, who is Jesse.
yes, who is Jesse, and
another Garland vet from Devs.
Oh, right, okay, I didn't know that, but she ends up, she shows herself at a rally or a protest,
Well,
violent
they're
protest.
covering. For some reason, they go to this water station where fresh water in New York City, somewhere in Brooklyn or Queens, it's not clear, is being distributed to people who apparently no longer have access to it from the tap. Perhaps the reservoir has been cut by
Right.
Western.
But the press hotel is in great shape, except for the elevators.
Yeah,
wonky.
once again, like just a throwaway line of dialogue, like suggesting why this is even necessary, might have been a little bit helpful. Like, oh,
yeah,
but instead, it's just like people are like, "I need water," and then there's a suicide bomber who has an American flag. We don't know which side this person is on. They blow themselves up, and Lee, the Kirsten Dunst character, who's the veteran, sort of anticipates it. She sees the person runs by. She kind of covers up Jesse, the younger, aspiring war correspondent, and they hide behind a police car, and they're fine, but there are people horribly maimed all around. It's quite an unpleasant scene, and she's like, "Next time I see you, covering in the field better be wearing a helmet. You know,
Yeah, and like the vest, the yellow vest.
You need to have this press vest,
Yeah.
and wear some.
If you're gonna be a war photographer, dress like one.
You need
it's
to
like,
have
cool.
you need to have Kevlar. Like,
yeah,
she has this weird kind of moralizing, but sound advice speech, and they meet her again at the hotel, and she's like, "I'm your big." This is a funny part we found very funny in person. She's like, "I'm your biggest fan, Lee, and you know, there's this other photographer who's also named Lee, and are you aware of her?" And she's like, "Yeah, I know her work." You know,
yeah, I know the other Lee. You think I don't know the other Lee?
Wait, you think no one's ever pointed out that I'm also a famous war photographer?
I mean, it's crazy, like you said, when you're giving so little information as to what is happening on the planet,
and then so much time is spent on this like
right, this other photographer. My actual hero is another Lee, also a photographer. I mean, the whole beginning of the movie, like you could sense it when we're watching it. I think in the theater is everyone's kind of putting together that like this movie is not what they expected, and not what they wanted, and you're just basically kind of saddling up from there on. Like I had a friend, a comedian, Brooks Allison. He had this great TikTok that was like, I mean, you know, I hate to do this on the pod, but it is funny.
Yeah, please.
Where he's like the studio head or whatever, the guy in charge of the movie, and he's on set, and he's like the producer, and he's like, "All right, guys, we're a month out from photojournalism in the Civil War. Can't wait to release photojournalism in the Civil War." And the guy at the back is like, "I think we should change the title to Civil War. I think photojournalism in Civil War is a pretty boring title." And he's like, "Well, that's what the movie is. The movie isn't a Civil War. It's just photojournalism during a Civil War."
Yeah, I mean,
and like when you see the trailer, I mean, A24 is kind of the tell. I mean, you know, we should have known we weren't going to get like a full Civil War.
Right. I mean, it has a $50 million budget or so, which is the biggest budget they've ever given to a movie. But
the runtime is also a tell. It's an hour 49. It's like, okay, they're not actually doing a Civil War movie, but the direction they took it in is like, basically, it seems like they made this movie because people like to see, I think, the shots of what is basically modern day America.
Washington, D.C. under siege.
Yeah, or
a hotel like burning in the middle
military helicopters over the Shenandoah. This is people, and like that's my favorite part of the movie. Where you're just like, oh yeah, like, you know, water rationing.
Oh, that's
in
a Kmart that is blowing up or whatever.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And people just have, I think, a very real
desire for that.
Desire to like see that for some reason.
Yeah, you know, in fact, when I was a kid, I think in 8th or 9th grade, we went on a school trip to Washington, as one does. I grew up outside New York, and it was like the big, I forget what we had a name for it, but it doesn't matter. And I remember walking through Washington, and the whole time I was there, and all the like monuments and the like fake Greek, you know, the fake kind of Greek temple vibe, I just had this recurring vision of like an armed army like storming through. And this movie, like, I was like, oh yeah, it's like my childhood weird apocalyptic vision made. And I'm like, is that like, Alex Garland's from the UK, so presumably he didn't, but it almost feels like the whole movie is just to get to that siege in DC where there's like tanks firing at the Lincoln Memorial, and like Lincoln statue blows up, or whatever. You know? It's like, oh look, there's like a Apache helicopter like flying over the Jefferson Memorial, and look, are they gonna blow up the Washington Monument? I don't know, but they should, right? Like it's like I mean, it feels like, in other words, it feels like a child's vision of like conflict come to home to roost in Washington.
I think that the lack of a story.
Michael, there's a very powerful story.
No, I mean like the background about like what led to the Civil War.
Why is this happening? Yeah,
I can see the decision. Like I don't like it, and it really makes me
you understand completely how they got to it, right? I mean, it's like they were like, well, if we make this a pro-Trump movie, no libs will see this. If we make this a two-lib movie, we're just gonna get roasted on like, you know, Rumble or whatever.
And I also think there's kind of this like lib notion of like, it doesn't matter what causes or which side. Like now
It's
we
just
need
like the
to.
democracy dies in darkness, right?
Yeah, that's
Like,
right. That's right.
just like, oh, well, if we don't, like, it's not important. Like, what's important is that we show how these heroic reporters and photographers document
Right.
this.
And the thing is, like, so we'll go through a couple of things that happen in this movie. These sequences where some of them you're just like, I can't believe that that was a sequence in a movie that we just took 10 minutes at the refugee camp or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But there are a couple of interesting, like when you see some of the way the other people are living, right?
yeah.
So for example, there's a moment where they're being shot at and they come face to face with these two militia guys who are also trying to shoot back at the house that they're being shot from.
And we don't
And
we don't ever learn who they actually are or whatever.
and there's like a tip of the cap to the notion that they don't even really know who they are.
That's
right. And so we've gone so far away from ideology and politics that these guys are shooting, and he says something to the effect like, because there's a guy shooting at me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm shooting.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is like, if you were to give me a Civil War movie where same sort of thing, you're getting like the footage of, you're hearing from the president every now and then, they're always turning up the radio to get some news. Like, I get it. It's that type of movie. They're not going to like show the inner workings of the government during this. Fine. But even just seeing those guys for like 2 minutes, I'm like, that's a more interesting movie than what we're watching.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Seeing a small group of militia try to figure out exactly what side they're on in a civil war in America
Totally
sounds
much more interesting.
like a way better movie. This is like, this just seems like the easiest possible way to make this movie. Put the press guy, the people on. So every single problem is, well, we should be able to go in there. We're press. Well, they don't care about press, but sometimes it does let them get in and they can get access. So like whatever
Right, and
thing
like
that they need to have happen, can be facilitated. But there's no, the story is literally about like a young woman getting good at war photography.
Yeah, and like one of the things I think we were most appalled by as we watched was the number of like freeze frame where there's a battle going on. Where there's one point where there's some kind of office complex and there's a bunch of rebels shooting at one troop or whatever. He's kind of he's up in a taller window and they're storming the building, etc. And probably like 30 or 40 times during this battle,
I'd say 50.
They cut
but in the whole movie 100 times.
Oh, 100 times in the movie at least. They cut to just a brief freeze frame in black and white that's meant to like show us the photo that this young photographer Jesse has captured, and it's very there's like a click. It's like very distracting.
Oh my god!
It's
so
it happens
effective, yeah.
so often that you're like, oh, are they? You're like, oh, are they photographers? Like, is that what's happening here? Like, I hadn't gotten that, but this clicking, this is making it clear
how
to
many
me.
times they do it. Yeah, and like, not only do they do this as she's figuring out how to be a good war photographer, the ending, which we'll get to in a bit in more detail, but they do the photo freeze frame thing so many times. So you're watching this like seeming like, supposed climax of the movie when they're storming the White House.
The Oval Office.
And every 25 seconds? Click. And it's like, who decided this?
What are we thinking? Michael, do you know how many times I would have? You know how many times I would have done that if I were the director? Zero.
Zero?
Yeah. I just I get it. She's a photographer, and there's even a scene when they go to after this battle that I just mentioned, which is relatively early in the runtime, maybe 30, 40 minutes in. They stop at this refugee camp, which you also mentioned, where they spend an inordinate amount of time watching kids like play soccer. And Jessie is like going through her film. She still shoots. All right, another thing. She still shoots on film, and is like developing negatives.
Yeah.
Like there's no like digital camera that in this weird It's like this retro.
Well, because I think it was meant to say that, that she's a real photographer.
Right. So she has, exactly, because the digital is ephemeral, but
it separates
the
her
analog
from those in her generation who are taking photos all the time.
But
not real photos like the way that she is.
Yeah. And they're going over the footage that she shot, and she's like, "Oh, a lot of these are like out of focus," and then
don't look at my photos.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. And Lee, the Kirsten Dunst character, is like, well, you got to, the hit rate's probably about 1 out of every 30. Is it like possibly usable or something? And then they go to the film, which they go to the shot that was very like lampshaded as like the money shot during the battle. Mm-hmm. She's like, look at that. And we're like confronted with this photo of this guy dying and his friend like holding him that was very clearly in the earlier sequence, like, this is like the Pulitzer winning photo. And it's like, I don't care about any of this. Like, what are we doing?
No, you can't care. I mean, they don't even set it up in a way that you could possibly care.
It's comical.
And in fact, the act of the photography only serves to like reduce your connection with the characters themselves. They have sequences where just like, okay, one of the things I said to you right after the movie is that like so much of it is felt like placeholder scenes and dialogue. I don't know if you've ever like worked on a screenplay, but you do get these times where you're like, okay, I want to just get through a draft, for example, or like you're having trouble with a scene, but you know what scene comes next. So sometimes you just put placeholder dialogue or placeholder.
Like, Bob, that's what we have to do. And like, you'll go back and like
you can say something is like, this is where she says you're going to be a good photographer one day. Right? And maybe you put like a note, a note, and then when you go back, the idea is to like,
right. But in this movie, for lack of a better term, they never went back.
And in this movie, it just feels they never went back. This like you'll have scenes where it's like you can see the screenplay being placeholder mode, being like scene with felled helicopter.
Lee's like, I want you to shoot this.
Lee takes.
This will be some great shots here for you to learn
and shows her how to be a photographer. But then in the actual movie,
that's just what happens.
They just are like, come look at this helicopter, and then she's like,
this is a great shot.
Shoot it. I want you to shoot it. And then they just watch her take photos of it. And the same thing goes for like, the like 1 in 30 hit rate. But then even with the way they react to crazy situations, where you're like, okay, what's an emotion that a wartime photographer might have? Oh, okay, here's one. Yes, I'm scared, but I also feel really alive. And then she literally just says that exact thing when describing. So Lee's like, how are you holding up, kid? And she's just like, I've never been so scared, but I've never felt so alive. And it's like this is the way through the whole movie. Where like the only time we even like hear them update themselves on their supposed mission of interviewing the president, it's like the grizzled vet giving a mock interview to the president. And it's like
Sammy is asking Joel. He's like, "Are you going to say this, that?"
Yeah.
Oh, have you refined your techniques for murdering civilians with airstrikes? And Joel's like, that's now we're getting there. Like that's what I'm gonna say. Yeah, good call, Sammy. It's like, what the heck?
Even the questions he's asking, you're like, wait, so like, you're gonna go all that way to be like,
couldn't they have set up?
Why are you murdering citizens? Like the president's gonna be found out? Like,
and like, what the hell is happening? We also learned that the president hasn't done any interviews in 14 months as the Civil Wars. We don't know how long the Civil War's been happening for, but at least that long. Mm-hmm. And they assume they'll just be able to get through his defenses and interview him, which, as we already said, is ridiculous. So a couple other scenes we should talk about. Not too many. There's one point where they go to a town that seems normal.
Oh, yeah.
And they go to a shop, and there's a cashier who's kind of like, they're like, there's like a civil war, right? And she's like, yeah, we just try not to think about it here.
Yeah, she's kind of like set up as like a Beacon's closet, too cool for school.
She's like, yeah, whatever.
We're not taking any of your clothing. Like this type of shit.
Like,
she's
Civil War is totally played out. Like, duh. Like,
she's like, I'm not an idiot. I know there's a civil war, but what can we do about it?
Oh, there's another funny moment before that where they're trying to get gas, and she's like, "We got $300 to pay for gas." And the guy's like, "$300? That gets you a ham sandwich." She's like, $300 Canadian. He's like, oh, now we're talking.
Yes.
Whoa.
No, but and then there's no tension.
Right, because they're like, $300 Canadian. Wow, that's...
Oh, Canadian. Okay, you can have the gas.
So we're to understand...
For some reason, lasts for the entire trip.
Right, they don't ever get gas again. And they go 700 miles or something.
I guess and they're in a... They can do whatever they want because they have Canadian money, which also really does a good job of showing how...
Canada's economy is just totally robust and fine.
There's no point in thinking through any of it.
Because Canada's not at all economically dependent upon the United States.
You would never see the Canadian dollar, which has famously been so strong.
It's so robust. And if the U.S. dollar tanks, Canada's dollar is just going straight up.
They don't even make it interesting. We
don't even learn anything about Europe or any other part of the world. The Canada thing
you could have them have euros, maybe there's some way that
Chinese yuan or something.
Yeah, right. That money moved away from the U.S. The idea that it moved to the Canadian market.
Yeah, Canada's got what 40 million people. That's probably a big enough economy to
right beside the country having the Civil War.
No, I mean it's so funny and ridiculous. But anyway, they go to this town and they go to the shop and they try on dresses and have this normal moment. And then as they're leaving, Sammy, the grizzled vet, is like, "Look up on the rooftop. Don't be obvious." And it just kind of pans and they're just bros with machine guns on the rooftop.
Yeah.
So we're to be like, oh, this is a normalcy that's enforced by the threat of violence. But again, that's it. We leave that scene and we're gone. We're on to the next stop.
And even that could be a better movie. Sure.
Yeah. What's that town
Someone's enforcing a degree
how did
of
that
normalcy.
Town... Well, the whole movie feels like an episode of The Last of Us, except without the intelligence and emotional stakes and character dynamics that The Last of Us has, right?
Right. I mean, never mind emotional. There's just no stakes. It's you don't cheer for anyone. And again, this is what I mean by, I think it's just too clever by half, right? That the idea was to remove the viewer so far from any sense of a side or any sense of knowing what happened or informed how this transpired or who might win and if it would be good if they win. It's simply to look at the mere act, which I guess I could see some sort of notion behind. But to me, instead of it being an interesting, almost philosophical exercise, it really just looks like they cut a trailer that they knew would work.
Yeah.
And then just made a movie.
Filled out the movie around the trailer.
People would come. We will literally call it Civil War. And we will show the Lincoln Memorial blowing up or whatever in the trailer.
Big miss to not use the Guns N' Roses song, Civil War.
In fairness, I went right away.
Well,
I was
we do have a podcast about the end of the world and
apocalypse. Yes, but my point is when I saw the trailer,
you were like, "I'm there."
I was. That
was even before the podcast had started.
I was with Maggie, my girlfriend, and I was like, "Oh, that's going to be terrible," and I will go see that the opening night. And I think that they knew. And this is I don't know if you experienced this in the theater, but because I certainly was laughing more than most people.
Oh, we were both laughing. It was just I felt a little guilty. I thought we were going to get shushed at a few moments because we were.
I don't know. I think that people.
I famously was shushed at Alien Covenant for laughing at that. Someone was like, "This is a very serious film about aliens. Do not laugh at the stupid romanticism references." Anyway,
but the thing is, you could hear people chuckle a few times. Every now and then you'd get a guffaw, there were people in there kind of when they went when they made their 8th reference to how important it is to be a journalist, yeah,
that's true.
But I got the sense that people were sort of profoundly bored during the movie.
It's a boring movie, like Ex Machina.
I find it way more boring than Ex Machina.
Yeah, at least Ex Machina is a little bit cooler.
It's also we talked about it in the podcast last week, but with Ex Machina, it's the questions he's looking at, it's not that interesting to hear what he has to say, but there's something being said.
Yeah.
It's we're in a new level. Not only does he have something, he doesn't even have something stupid to say. He has nothing to say. and again, it's a classic Garland moment of like and a lot of these ones that we've watched in our podcast already of interesting idea, not the greatest execution you could,
Yeah,
and that's like
yeah.
when I kept watching all these little scenes that are meant to just like kind of give color basically to inform the journalists themselves, the refugee camp, the two guys shooting at the other guy, the scene that you just described, the even like the Brooklyn trying to get water, each individual scene would have made a better entire movie than the movie
And
itself.
following these journalists experiencing these scenes with no explanation and no depth.
Yeah. So then we get let's just touch on how they cobble together one of the worst endings I think.
Before we talk about the ending,
seen.
we've got to talk about Jesse Plemons, right?
Yes. Okay. Sure.
So they meet up randomly on the road with these two reporters that Joel, the Wagner Moura character, is friends with, and they are from Hong Kong. They are obviously of Chinese ancestry, and they've been covering the Civil War as well. And they do this bizarre thing where they're like riding really fast next to each other in cars, and one guy jumps into their car, and then Jessie mysteriously jumps across, even though she's never met these people. She has no idea who they are.
But she feels alive. Remember?
Well, yeah. And she jumps across into their car while the cars are going like 60 miles an hour and could at any point come across a car coming the other direction. Although there aren't too many, but that does happen a few minutes later. And then the other car speeds ahead, and after a few seconds, Sammy's like, something isn't right about this, right? And they get up ahead. They swerve to avoid a car. They find that their car has been abandoned on the side of the road, and they have been captured by who else? Jesse Plemons, the greatest actor person of all time. I love Jesse Plemons. I will do anything to support him, including
including going to watch this movie. Although I heard.
Well, he's married to Kristen Dunst too. So
yes, of course. I mean, the Hollywood's greatest couple. I think I heard that the person who was supposed to do this role couldn't, and
so Plemons just showed up.
She just got on the horn to her husband and was like, remember that character? Remember that character from Breaking Bad that you played?
Todd?
Can you do that again for 480 seconds and steal this entire movie?
And he's like, I think so. I think I can conjure that.
And so let's talk about the scene for a bit, because not only is he is quite captivating.
He's more interesting than anything else in the movie.
Yeah.
And we learn again, even though we learn almost nothing about like who he is, what's going on.
Right. What I will say for the movie, since we've just been saying bad things, is that like in the Plemons sequence where he plays this very violent executioner style.
Right. He's like we know nothing about him, but he's kind of like a Colonel Kurtz figure.
Yeah, like he's dumping bodies.
There's a pit of bodies
grave.
that has tens of 20s of lots of people in it.
And so he's gone, and he's gotten the other reporter and Jessie, who's once she switched cars, and now they're obviously under threat because
he's holding them at gunpoint. They're on their knees, and the three other characters approach. Four other characters at this point. The other Chinese reporter is with them.
Well, yeah, but the one guy, the old guy who can't, Sammy, he doesn't.
He's like, I'm too infirm to go down there.
Yeah,
and so he doesn't. And
but what I was gonna say is that when they all start getting interrogated and basically are fighting for their lives through whatever questions that they answer and how they answer them. I think that, and so he is sort of, the line that's from the trailer that gets everybody, it's like, I'm American. And then Plemons like, what kind of American are you? Right. Like, and you get the sense that he
has some set of there's some expectation that like one answer is right and the other is wrong.
Right.
And
so when
the trailer makes you think
Hong Kong, the guy says he's from Hong Kong and gets shot right away.
Yeah. Right? But you kind of think if someone was like, I'm from Connecticut, like they'd get killed. Whereas if they were like, I'm from
yeah.
Arkansas, I'd be like, oh, you're okay.
Right. She's like, I'm from Missouri, and he's like, yeah, that's America.
But then,
right?
the other guy's like, I'm from Florida, and he's like, and it's like,
well, see, so what I was going to say about the sequence overall, which is like, interesting enough because he is great.
You know that he's going to kill people.
And there's actually some tension. It's like, which one of the characters we know is going to die? We're going to find out soon. Could be any of them. Not really married to any of these people, so I'm sure they've got all these choices. But his interrogation, I think, is closer to what Garland maybe thought he was getting to and driving at in this movie. That may have been interesting. This idea of facing these threats, it being unknown what you are supposed to do to get by, that we have become so reduced to factions and splits in the political and social fabric that every encounter you have is rife with this potential for either yourself being saved or yourself being killed, depending on which way the cookie crumbles. And it could create an environment, a sort of cabin fever of like, I don't know who I'm supposed to say I'm fighting for. I don't know why. The idea of why I'm fighting for something is so far removed.
Fog of war, but on a huge cultural level where it's like at any given moment you don't know who's who and what's what.
Right. And I feel as though the movie would have been better off sort of getting further into that condition.
Oh, for sure.
And that is why, in addition to like creating a bit more of that fog, as opposed to just not caring about what happened, right? Just not addressing what created the Civil War. And on top of that, like profoundly incorrect choice to center it on photojournalists.
Yeah.
Because like unless he's maybe trying to show how ridiculous they are. Like,
I don't think so, but
like that. But to me, it's like if he's trying. No,
I think
show
it's just a simple. I think it's simple liberal journo good.
He couldn't have been more clear to me that these people were completely pointless. There's no indication that, like, first of all, the journalism doesn't have any impact ever on. We
never see any impact of it, and in fact, we see the
impact that Lee is like, I send my pictures back and I used to think they made a difference, but they don't. But I still do it. Right. Like it doesn't. So like they've made it so that it doesn't matter. There's no sense that, like, for example, you could have made the movie where there was some feeling that, some entity didn't believe something and there was no way to see that something because they had shut down all of the informational capacities. So now the photojournalists have to like go in with a militia by their side to try to get photographic and video evidence of something. Like there could have been a way to make this matter. But instead, it's like,
I agree.
Is the idea that we're hoping they all stay alive to sit down with Nick Offerman to talk for a bit?
Well, hello, I'm Nick Offerman. The thing is, the classic movie of like journalism is good is All the President's Men, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like Robert Redford is Bob Woodward and Dustin Hoffman is Carl Bernstein, and they take down the corrupt president with their dogged, right? And like that just feels insanely quaint, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's been a lot of vilification of journalism, in many cases correctly. I think there are a lot of horrible journalists who just utterly repeat propaganda and repeat whatever talking point the Pentagon or whoever gives them. And there's very little sense of there being a real and meaningful interrogation of anything. Sure. And, there's a variety of reasons for that. And I'm not blaming the journalists themselves, but there's no interrogation in this film, however, of any possible problems with journalism, and their neutrality is seen as good, necessary, and an agent for real change. And we see this in the final sequence where there's a siege of Washington. The Western forces are just like, we should mention Sammy, the elder statesman. He takes a stray bullet as they're fleeing. He saves them from Jesse Plemons by running over Jesse Plemons, a great loss, R.I.P.
Right, and I'm guessing there was a lot of mutiny, right? Because the U.S. military is just getting their asses kicked.
Well,
right?
and the Western forces are not some ragtag militia. They have war helicopters and tanks, and they have
Well, so they must have like seized all of the U.S.
the National Guard
assets.
or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
just clearly. And one thing I love is both sides are very diverse, right? There's like the Western forces have like a African American lady sergeant who's like, go on through, and there's like an Asian American guy with her, and there's like a bunch of white people, and there's a bunch of, it's like, there's like, just in case we were wondering, like, no, there is absolutely no like racial divide in this civil war. Like there are people.
It definitely felt purposeful. Like we don't want to deal with that question.
Absolutely. Like again, just anything that might reasonably come into play in the current American, like off the table. It would have been really funny if they had gone so far as to have like a very obviously queer like member of the like through this way, boys. Just like really being like no, the rebels are like they're pro trans, they're pro black, they're pro. It's just like that's not the reason this is happening. It's not that. But they. I mean, in the most predictable moment in human history, and very frustrating. So Lee, the grizzled vet, as they're like attempting to get into the White House, has an inexplicable nervous breakdown, and we just see the other thing the film does a lot.
It's not inexplicable. I think the idea is that when finally confronted with the image of the White House and Washington
being destroyed,
actually succumbing, that this war photographer who's seen so much and has taught this child how to like turn off her emotions so she can also do the job as a war photographer. She become a
perfect machine of documentation.
That, seeing Lincoln's statue explode, it's like, oh my god, like America, not the beautiful.
So you think that's I mean that's horrible if that's what's happening.
I mean, look. Otherwise,
no, I think you're right. That honestly had not even dawned on me.
Well, the only other thing is like this old guy
who died, Sammy.
So he saves them from Clemens just to finish,
and then dies. They get him no help in time, and he just bleeds out.
Right. So
the
he drives a car through these guys to get his journalist out before Clemens kills everybody.
Real callback to Breaking Bad again.
That's right. Right. So, but on the drive out, after he's been the hero, you find out he's been shot. So now he's dead. And that certainly gets to Lee, but she doesn't immediately break down.
It's when they're like under siege, like approaching the White House. And we see her. Another thing the film does a lot is they cut to emotional scenes in silence. Yep. Right? Where it's just like maybe the soundtrack is still going a little bit, but you can't hear what's happening. You just see Kirsten Dunst's face as she's like, ah, she's like screaming in anguish.
Yeah.
But you don't hear her. It's
right. So what happens is that she is falling to pieces and she can't really move and she doesn't want to be there, but she's still getting pushed along by the others. Good? The young one, Jessie. She's becoming such a good photographer.
She's nailing it. She's
moving around.
And
she's jumping when she should jump.
And we're seeing every single one of her shots. And let me tell you,
we've probably seen 20 pictures.
They are incredible. Like this is just
what's crazy. It's so much better than the pictures before. Like.
She's improved massively. These are all in focus. The light is perfect, despite them being in free for all night war.
But you're seeing her like jump out of the corner just in time, snap that shot, and then jump back. Whereas before, like the dude, the other journalist, the like Hunter Thompson guy, who's always like,
Joel,
you can't stop drinking and smoking, Joel. Yeah. He's always like grabbing her to save her,
right?
Now hitting on her.
Now our instincts are just. They're aces. She's
So
they get into the White House,
right? But no, this is an important thing to talk about with Lee's breakdown, which makes the ending even more preposterous. Is that she is having a nervous breakdown. She's
not taking any photographs. She's
not taking any photographs. You get the sense she's done. This is it, right? She can't do it, and she's putting herself in danger sometimes.
She has the war correspondent yips, basically.
But then, she's like the Chuck Knobloch of war photographers.
Exactly.
But so then she sees these armored,
the presidential
like,
limo and some armored cars try to escape,
right?
And they
try to escape.
They don't make it very far.
And everybody's like, that must be where the president is. Let's put all of our resources and weaponry
Lee
right on
has
those
this
cars.
light bulb.
But Lee, because she's the intrepid war photographer, has more of an understanding of strategy than all of the military people, who are like, surely they're not still in the White House.
Who are like busy machine gunning the like driver of the limo. He must
be in there. Yeah. She is like, he didn't even come out of there. And somehow this kind of cures the breakdown.
She's fine. So she's back. She's back.
She's back. That whole process ends. And of course, as I turn to you, the second that they get to Washington, D.C. during the movie and say, I wonder if she's going to die saving the younger journalist. Right? Like, there's no way that could there's no way they can go there.
That's too, no. That's
right. It would be too on the nose for her. And then of course, the apotheosis of like the value of getting the shot, is that
Jesse jumps out into the hallway as they're fighting some Secret Service
leaving
agents.
herself so exposed to get the perfect photo, though. And it really was such, like, you saw the photo.
I mean,
it was...
How could I not? It was freeze-framed on the screen. It's burned into my retinas, basically.
Honestly, I saw it like 5 days ago, and it makes me worry about this country still. That's the effect that it had. But like, as she's getting the photo, she's, guess what? Putting herself in the line of fire. Now, what's going to happen? Maybe the woman who had just had a nervous breakdown and was unable to move suddenly cat-like leaps onto the stage, perfectly covering Jesse's body so that
as Jesse is photographing the moment of her death.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like it's like how I imagine like Air Bud ends.
Well, this is like some big play where
the dog scores a basket. This is what it felt like.
It felt more like Hamlet to me, actually.
It felt like Little Giants.
Go bid the soldiers shoot.
No, like Little Giants, where the nerd kid writes the perfect play or whatever, and then they execute it.
Or what about Rookie of the Year, when he like loses his ability to throw at the end, but still manages to get
That's right. That's the best one. He's still got to get those 3 strikes, right?
Yeah, but and they have to use they use trickery.
So now she's dead.
She's dead, but Jesse's like the job is still to be done. The president.
Oh yeah, they don't care about her really. They kind of.
She spends like 1/2 a second sort of reflecting on Lee's now prone corpse in the.
Well, because she now knows, though, Stu, that humans and life is actually less important than documenting.
Well, fear is the mind killer, to quote Dune. I mean, she's clearly. She's taken some Bene Gesserit training, some Mentat training, perhaps, and she's ascended to a level beyond human, And then we see Nick Offerman get pulled out from hiding under the desk in the Oval Office. Also very predictable. Like, where else would the president be? But
yeah, if I was a president hiding, I'd make straight for the Oval Office
and under the desk. I mean, that's the one place that you can be sure no one will look. And Joel, they're about to kill him. Just the Western forces are just going to summarily execute the president of the United States in the Oval Office, which we're meant to understand is like a moment of triumph. Joel's like, wait, before you do that, I got an interview. We need a quote. And the quote is like, don't let them kill me.
Yeah, please don't kill me.
And then Joel's like, that'll do.
Right,
so like that was the interview. He did it. Mission accomplished. Get the banner.
Mission accomplished.
Get the banner on the aircraft carrier.
Right. I mean,
what the hell?
Yeah.
So like their 2 friends died pointlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he'll be famous now as the guy who asked one question before this.
I don't think so. I think the quote will just be remembered.
You're right.
Why would they remember this guy?
No one remembers the guy who recorded Neil Armstrong on the moon.
I mean, and like anyone could have asked that question.
Not a really good analogy. But
right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's like in lieu of so the only difference is that instead of the people about to kill him going, do you have any last words? In this world, the journalist, has his 2 friends die. This young woman, no doubt, scarred for life from what she's seen. Once she comes down from the
she's fine.
No, once she comes down from the adrenaline rush of being a war photographer.
Michael, no. She's next level. She's the new Lee. Lee's dead.
She's the new Lee.
She's gonna work with Joel
change her name to go right in the footsteps of all the other Lees.
I think that's right. All right.
Yeah.
One thing I would have really liked at the end of the movie is if Joel, after asking his question, had pulled out a gun and shot the president. I would have really liked that because it would have been like this whole movie is fetishizing them as these like agents of documentation and non-intervention. They just thrown that out the window at the end, and he's like, "You caused my friend to die," or something like just like a weird. That would have been. I would have laughed, and I would have said this is the best movie of all time if that had happened. Just because it would have been so non sequitur. But I'm a big fan of those. All right. Any last thoughts? Like, I think we've pretty much covered it. This was a disappointing experience, to say the least.
I think we should really set out whatever. Next time we are on a TV show or a movie, we should try to find something that we like, because we don't hate everything.
No, I like Jesse Plemons. Noted. I liked some of the shots were effective. It's a competently made film. It's not.
Yeah, look,
the Siege of DC looks cool. As I said, it lived up to my childish fantasy of a 14-year-old.
But maybe we'll make it a goal sometime in the next few episodes to try to find something that we actually are interested by what they have to say about the apocalypse.
Yeah, and to that end, what are we talking about for next week?
Well, we're not going there quite yet, and I wouldn't say that you like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right?
Well, you'd be wrong. I do like it. In fact, some would even say I love it.
We're heading back into history, reality of some sense. Although I believe we also touch briefly on. Kevin Costner will make another appearance in the podcast, as we will.
It's been too long.
We will talk a little bit about the way that 13 Days, the movie, sort of pseudo-fictionalized the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we are. But the long and short of it is we are going to be doing an episode on the Cuban Missile Crisis, the moment when the two superpowers came closest to ending the world.
Would you believe it if I told you that I refer to the Cuban? I talk about it so often that I just call it the crisis. And then all my close friends are. I'm like, yeah, we're doing an episode on the crisis. They just instantly clock what that is because I'm so familiar with my relentless talk about it.
Yeah, so I think the idea is a little bit more so than what we did with the Al Gore thing, which was just kind of look at the movie Inconvenient Truth. We'll probably look at a few different representations of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and give a little background on the history, and
wonder how you will be doing that.
Yeah. Wonder how everything could have gone differently. And yeah, it'll be good. So I look forward to that. Now, in the meantime, as we said at the opening, if you could please remember to follow the podcast on the podcatcher of your choice. Follow us on Instagram at The End of the World WMS. Leave a rating or review if you are so inclined. And also, just tell a friend if you want to.
Just pass it on. You can pass it on.
Pass on the word. And until then, this has been The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
I'm Stu, and we'll see you next time.